They say home is where the heart is. But what happens when the heart breaks inside the home you spent your summer fixing? I didn't plan to spend my vacation scraping off decades of peeling paint, rewiring ancient sockets, and laying down hardwood plank by plank. But when my mom called me in early June and said, "Sweetheart, the lake house is falling apart. We need your help," I said yes, before even thinking twice. It was my parents' place, the old house by the lake where we used to spend weekends, skipping stones and chasing dragonflies. It wasn't just wood and bricks, it was where memories lived, or so I thought. They told me they couldn't afford a contractor, but promised they'd pay me $8,000 when I finished. Not much for 2 months of sweat and splinters, but I agreed. Because family, right? So I packed my tools, said goodbye to the city, and moved into the lake house for the summer. And then I worked. I worked like it was my job, because it was. New floors, fresh paint, a roof that didn't leak when the rain rolled in, and a kitchen that finally looked like it belonged in this century. I even landscaped the yard, replanted the flower beds Mom used to love before she stopped gardening altogether. I wasn't doing this for compliments. I was doing it for them, for us. When it was finally done, when the last light fixture hung and the front steps gleamed like they were smiling, they were over the moon. My dad, Ethan, actually grinned and said, "Looks like a brand new house." So when we all sat down in the cozy living room sipping tea, I felt good, accomplished, proud. That feeling didn't last. Mom, Linda, took a sip, smiled at me gently, and said, "By the way, honey, about the money. We gave it to Michael and Sophie for their honeymoon." I blinked, thought she misspoke. Then Ethan chuckled and added, "They needed a break before the wedding. You understand, right?" I didn't, not even a little. And that was the moment something cracked, not in the walls, but in me. At first, I thought it was a joke, a bad one. "You gave them my payment?" I asked, blinking hard like maybe I'd misheard. Mom tilted her head. "Well, technically it was our money. We just figured you wouldn't mind. Michael's been under so much pressure with the wedding, and Sophie's been dreaming of this honeymoon." I waited for them to say, "Just kidding," but that part never came. Ethan leaned back like he had nothing left to explain. "Come on, Rachel. You're always saying you don't take vacations." This made sense. Something inside me twisted, not just from the betrayal, but from the way they looked at me. Like I was the unreasonable one. Like my exhaustion, my time, my effort meant less than their favorite child's pre-wedding getaway. "I spent 2 months building this place up from the ground," I said quietly. "You promised me. We'll pay you eventually," Mom said with a sigh, like I was inconveniencing her. "But right now, Michael needs it more," Ethan added, as if that settled it. I don't remember standing up, but suddenly I was. The weight of everything, the early mornings, the paint fumes, the bruises on my knees, it all came rushing in like a flood. "Well," I said, voice steady, "I hope you understand I'm done doing anything for you." Mom's smile disappeared. Ethan sat up, eyes narrowing. "Rachel, don't be dramatic," Mom said, sharp now. "Dramatic?" I laughed. "You gave away the one thing I asked for in return, and you didn't even think I'd be upset?" Ethan scoffed. "It's not like you need the money, but that wasn't the point. They made a promise, and they broke it." For Michael, the first walked out of the lake house without another word, ignored their calls, their texts, the guilt-tripped voicemails about tearing the family apart. Then one evening, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't expected, Michael. The first almost didn't answer, but something in me was curious. "Rachel? Hey, are you okay?" His voice was gentle, hesitant. "Did Mom and Dad tell you what happened?" He paused. "No, just that you were upset." They didn't give details. "Of course not," I exhaled. "Do you know where they got the money for your honeymoon?" Silence. "What do you mean?" "They gave you the money they owed me, for the renovations." More silence. I could hear the mental math happening on the other end. "They what?" His voice cracked. "They promised me $8,000. Instead, they sent it to you and Sophie." Oh my God, Rachel. I had no idea. "I know. It's not your fault." "No, I'm sending it back." "Michael, no," he cut in. "You earned that. I wouldn't have taken a cent if I knew." And true to his word, an hour later, the full amount hit my account. It should have felt like closure, but that night, my phone rang again. Linda. Ethan, then Linda again. A text followed. "Did Michael send you money?" I replied with a single word. "Yes." The next call came fast. "You had no right to take that money back." Mom shrieked when I picked up. I laughed. Actually laughed. "Are you serious? You made him do it." "No. Michael made his own decision. You should be proud. At least one of your kids knows what integrity looks like." She gasped like I'd slapped her. Ethan got on the line. "You're going to send it back?" No, I said, and hung up. That was the moment I realized they weren't just entitled, they were delusional. And if they wanted to act like nothing was owed, like I was being the difficult one, then maybe it was time they felt the cost of that choice. Not just emotionally, but financially. After I hung up on Ethan, I stared at the wall for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to do next. I did. I just needed to feel everything fully first. The thing about betrayal isn't just the act itself. It's the slow unraveling of everything you thought was true. I believed my parents valued my effort, respected my time. But when it came down to it, they didn't see me as their daughter, just as labor. A resource, a means to an end. And now, after Michael did the right thing, something they should have done, they were furious. Not at themselves, but at me, for exposing the lie they told so easily. A few days passed. I didn't respond to texts, calls, or guilt-laced voicemails. Each one became more dramatic than the last. "You're tearing the family apart," Mom said in one, "over a few measly dollars." Ethan sent a single text that made me laugh. "Give the money back. This is final." As if he were issuing some kind of royal decree. Then came the doorbell. It rang once, then again, and again. I knew that pattern, Linda. Impatient, arms folded, dramatics in full bloom. I almost didn't answer, but a part of me was done hiding from their dysfunction. She stepped inside without waiting. Typical. She'd always treated boundaries like suggestions. "We need to talk," she said curtly. "No, we really don't." She sighed like a woman burdened by the ungratefulness of the world. "Fine," she said, pulling out a folded piece of paper. Then read this. I opened it. A bill for rent. "You lived in our lake house for 2 months," she said. "You ate our food, used our electricity, slept under our roof. It's only fair that you contribute." I stared at her. "You're charging me rent. After I spent 2 months fixing the place? You didn't do it for free," she snapped. "We agreed on a price. And then Michael needed the money. You can't just take it back." I shook my head. "That's funny because I did." She folded her arms. "If you're going to be petty, then yes, we'll charge you rent. It's only fair." "Okay then," I said calmly. "Then I guess it's only fair that I charge you contractor rates." Her expression twitched. "What?" I pulled out my phone. "Let's do the math. A full renovation of a lake house? Professional contractors would have charged you $50,000 easily. Subtract the $8,000 you owed me. You still owe me $42,000. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her face turned a deep shade of red. "Rachel, don't be ridiculous." No, I smiled. "You're right. It's only fair." She stormed out without another word. And that's when the idea formed, slowly but clearly. My name was on every receipt, every purchase, every nail, faucet, tile, and plank of flooring. They had promised to reimburse me. They didn't, which meant, technically, none of it was theirs. The next morning, I rented a truck, loaded my toolbox, drove down the long gravel path to the lake house. The place looked picturesque in the morning mist. If only people knew what it cost me, not in money, but in respect. I started small. The outdoor lighting I'd installed, unscrewed. The stylish house numbers I'd mounted, gone in seconds. I walked through the door. I still had a key and headed for the kitchen. Cabinet doors I'd replaced, removed one by one. The sleek faucet, disconnected and taken. I moved methodically. Light fixtures, floating shelves. The brand new shower head in their en-suite bathroom, gone. I even replaced it with their old, leaky one. Poetic. And then the flooring. Hardwood I'd laid by hand, every board glued and nailed down with care. I dropped to my knees and started prying it up, slowly and cleanly, stacking the planks carefully. I knew I could reuse them elsewhere. I was halfway through a corner of the living room when I heard it. Tires screeching in the gravel driveway. The front door slammed open. Ethan charged in, face red, fists clenched. Linda trailed behind him, out of breath. "What the hell are you doing?" he bellowed. I wiped sweat off my brow, getting back what I paid for. "You can't do that," Linda shrieked. I held up a plank. "I can, actually. My name's on the receipt, so technically, this is mine." "You ungrateful," Ethan started, but I held up a finger. "Careful. Say something you can't take back. You're destroying our home." "No," I said. "I'm just undoing my work, since you didn't think it was worth paying for." That's when another voice cut in from the door. "Rachel, what's going on?" "Michael." He looked around, eyes wide, taking in the half-empty walls, the ripped-up flooring, the toolbox on the kitchen counter. "They're trying to charge me rent," I said, standing up, "so I'm collecting." He turned sharply to our parents. You're serious? You steal her money and now you want to punish her for getting it back? Linda snapped. Michael, this doesn't concern you. It concerns me when you lie and manipulate. I paid her back because you wouldn't. And now you're pulling this? Ethan's voice went cold. We're your parents. You don't talk to us like that. Michael laughed bitterly. Then stop acting like entitled children. I hadn't expected it, the way his voice shook, the fury behind his words. Maybe he'd spent years seeing this, and only now, finally, it snapped. Linda gasped, clutching her chest like a martyr. I can't believe this. After all we've done for you, for both of you. Ethan narrowed his eyes. If you're going to betray this family, Michael, don't bother showing up to the wedding. The silence was instant, heavy. Michael blinked. You're uninviting me? You heard me, Ethan said. You and Sophie can go start your little life without us. Linda added, voice trembling. It breaks our hearts, but you leave us no choice. I waited for Michael to snap, but he didn't. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his house key, and placed it gently on the table. You know what? He said, voice steady. Okay, I'm done. Then he turned to me, nodded toward the crowbar, and said, Need a hand with the rest of the floors? I smiled for the first time in days. Yeah, grabbed the pry bar. As the two of us knelt side by side, tearing up what I had once lovingly installed, I realized something profound. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't about destruction. It's about reclaiming what was yours and making damn sure they remember exactly why they lost it. When Michael and I left the lake house, we didn't slam the door. We didn't yell or look back or even raise our voices. We just walked away. We didn't need theatrics. We had the truth. That night, we sat in a booth at a quiet diner about 30 minutes out of town. Sophie joined us not long after. She had the kind of expression that said she'd just run a mental marathon. You okay? I asked Michael, nursing my third cup of black coffee. He nodded. Not really, but I will be. Sophie leaned forward, looking at me. Rachel, they seriously told him not to come to the wedding. Yeah, Michael muttered. Said I betrayed the family. They did you a favor, I said. Now you don't have to pretend anymore. He chuckled under his breath. You should have seen Mom's face when I tossed the key on the table. Oh, I did, I smirked. It was almost worth the $8,000. Almost. Later that night, back in my apartment, I lay awake thinking. Not about the money anymore. That part had been dealt with. I had it back, thanks to Michael, not our parents. No, what kept me up was how quick they were to turn. The second I stopped being useful, I became the villain. And when Michael sided with me, he got cut off too. Just like that. It was never about love. It was about control. And they'd lost it. The next morning, I opened my laptop and logged onto Facebook, a platform my parents practically used as a PR machine. I had seen their recent posts. So proud of the renovation. Hard work pays off. Photos of the house gleaming in the sunset. Linda in front of the new cabinets. Ethan standing smugly on the new porch. Not once did they mention me, so I made a post of my own. Post, hey friends and family, just a little clarification on something. If you've seen my parents' recent photos of their beautifully renovated lake house, I just want to let you know I did that. I spent 2 months living there, doing the work myself, floors, plumbing, electrical, painting, even landscaping. They promised to pay me $8,000. Instead, they gave that money to my brother Michael and his fiancée Sophie for a honeymoon without telling me. When Michael found out, he paid me back himself. My parents responded by disinviting him from his own wedding. Just wanted to clear that up in case anyone's under the impression they did it themselves. Then I attached before and after photos, cracked walls, broken light fixtures, then the glossy Instagram-worthy after shots, and I tagged them and Michael and a few family members. Then I logged off. The explosion didn't take long. Within an hour, I had a dozen messages. Some from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Some from family friends who wrote things like, "This can't be true," and "Wow, I thought they were better than that." Michael texted me a screenshot of his phone, 6 missed calls from Mom, 3 from Dad, and a long, all caps, Facebook message. "Why would you do this to us?" Sophie replied to the post with a simple comment. "Everything Rachel said is true, and we support her 100%. That was the first domino. By the end of the day, several extended relatives had chimed in. Aunt Caroline wrote, "So disappointed in you, Linda. Rachel's done nothing but help you." Uncle Paul commented, "Sounds like karma came faster than expected." And then, finally, The phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. I picked up anyway. It was Linda. Her voice was high and tight, brittle, like she was holding back rage behind forced sweetness. Rachel, delete that post. No. You're humiliating us, I shrugged. I'm just telling the truth. You're making us look like monsters. If the shoe fits, she sputtered, but I didn't give her time to gather steam. I ended the call mid-sentence. Then Ethan texted me. You have no idea what you just did. Oh, but I did. They'd spent years building this image. The perfect couple, the beautiful home, the loving, successful family. That post didn't just crack the surface, it shattered it. For the next few days, they tried to control the damage. Passive-aggressive posts appeared on Linda's page about false narratives and family betrayal. Ethan tried calling Michael to smooth things over. Even Sophie got a long-winded email titled, "Let's talk this out." None of us responded. They weren't sorry. They were exposed. But even with all that, I wasn't done. Because while public shaming was satisfying, it wasn't accountability, and I had something they hadn't considered. Receipts, literal ones. Every piece of wood, every tool, every fixture, faucet, screw, bought under my name with my card. With the promise of reimbursement, they didn't pay. So I filed a mechanic's lien on the lakehouse for $50,000. People don't realize this, but contractors, or anyone who does significant unpaid work on a property, can place a lien that prevents refinancing or sale until the debt is cleared. It's legal. It's enforceable. And in this case, it was poetic. 2 days later, the angry texts started again. Linda, you cannot do this to US Ethan. This is our home. How dare you? Me, it's only fair. Then I blocked their numbers. Michael and Sophie officially uninvited them from the wedding. At first, our parents acted like they didn't care. But when the RSVPs closed and they still didn't receive one, Mom cracked first. She sent Sophie a long, teary message. We just want to be there for your special day. Sophie left it unread. Michael told me later that Josh had always thought our parents were toxic. He just didn't want to say it out loud before. Now, he was more supportive than ever. They're terrible, Josh had told him. Good call keeping them out. As for the lien, my parents were forced to pay it off, full amount, in cash. They had to sell their car to cover it. Michael and I didn't gloat. We didn't celebrate. But we did smile. Just a little. Not because they suffered, but because we finally stopped letting them get away with everything. The morning of the wedding, the sky was flawless. The lake shimmered like polished glass, and the breeze carried that early autumn scent, a mix of pine, faded sunscreen, and just a hint of change. I stood with Michael outside the venue, a restored barn overlooking a quiet field. He adjusted his tie with shaking hands. You good? I asked. He nodded slowly. Yeah. Nervous, but good. I smiled. They're really not coming, you know. He glanced at me. You sound surprised, I guess. Part of me thought they'd show up anyway. Try to make a scene, demand attention. Michael exhaled. They know better now. That was true. For once in our lives, they had finally run out of power. The days leading up to the wedding had been quieter than I expected. No phone calls. No new Facebook rants. No drive-by surprise visits with fake apologies wrapped in emotional manipulation. They were silent. Not because they felt guilt, but because they'd been outplayed, publicly, legally, emotionally. The lien on the lakehouse, paid in full. The day after I filed it, I got a certified check for the full $50,000. No note, no apology, just cold compliance. According to a cousin, they sold their car and borrowed money from a family friend to cover it. Good. They should have thought of that before stealing from me. Michael and Sophie stood firm. There was no reconciliation, no dramatic reunion, no seat saved just in case. It wasn't cruel. It was clear. Their actions had consequences. And for once, we weren't the ones suffering them. The ceremony was beautiful, simple, peaceful, honest. Sophie walked down the aisle glowing, arm in arm with her grandmother. Michael looked like he might cry when he saw her. The vows were heartfelt, not perfect. The kind of vows you write when you've lived through real family tension and still believe in love anyway. No one whispered, "Where are the parents?" Because the people who mattered were there. I sat at the siblings' table during the reception, nursing a champagne flute and watching Michael and Sophie dance to a song they picked months ago before everything exploded. Someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned to see Sophie's mother holding a tiny plate of cake. I just wanted to say thank you. I blinked. Me, she nodded. Michael told us everything. What you did for them, for the house, for standing up for yourself. I smiled politely, unsure of what to say. You're brave, she added. And honestly, I'm glad my daughter married into your side of the family. Even if, I laughed. Yeah, I know, she winked. Enjoy the cake. It's not poisoned. Later, after the music had faded and the guests had trickled out, I stood outside the barn with Michael. The sky was turning lavender blue. The stars were starting to show. He nudged me. Think they learned anything? I considered it for a long moment. No, I said finally. But that's not my problem anymore. He nodded. That feels good, doesn't it? Better than I expected. We stood in silence, watching a pair of ducks glide across the lake in the distance. The cool air settled in my lungs like a reset button. They treated you like a utility, he said. Not a daughter. They treated you like an investment, I added. Not a son, he looked down. Yeah, you're right. We didn't need to say more. We both knew what had been lost, but also what had been found. Boundaries, respect, solidarity. For the first time, it felt like we were really siblings, not just people who happened to grow up in the same house. Michael reached into his pocket and pulled something out. A key, shiny and silver. I had a copy made, he said, holding it out to me. I looked at him. To the new place. Just in case you want to come by. I smiled and took it. 2 weeks later, I got one final email from Linda. Subject, for what it's worth, Rachel. We don't agree with how things were handled, but we miss you. We're family. Family should stick together, even when things get hard. Please think about that. Love, Mom. I didn't reply, because that was the problem, wasn't it? They only called it family when they were losing control. They only missed me when I stopped giving. They only wanted reconciliation when their pride was too expensive to maintain. I closed the email and archived it without reading it twice. The lake house? I heard from a neighbor that it hasn't looked the same since I took the fixtures. They're trying to renovate again, but this time with contractors. It's not going well. They're spending more than they would have if they'd just paid me in the first place. Poetic justice has a renovation clause, apparently. As for me, I moved on. I picked up a few new renovation gigs, but I don't do freebies anymore, not for anyone. I've learned that love and loyalty shouldn't cost you your dignity. And if someone demands both, that's not family. That's exploitation. Michael and Sophie invited me over for dinner last week. Their new place is modest, but full of warmth, full of choice, of freedom. We sat on their back deck, eating pasta, watching the sun go down. Sophie turned to me and asked, "So what's next for you?" I thought about it, smiled. Whatever I want, because now, for the first time in a long time, the foundation beneath me feels solid. Story 2. They say family is supposed to be your foundation. For me, it was more like a cracked sidewalk, barely holding together, and mostly just a tripping hazard. I'm Nate, 33 now, and recently, I attended my cousin's wedding. The event itself was beautiful outdoor venue, string lights, heartfelt vows. But it wasn't the wedding people talked about afterward. Nope, it was what happened at the reception that took the spotlight. More specifically, the little public chat I had with my parents. Let's rewind a bit. My relationship with my family, tense at best, especially with my parents and my younger brother Danny, who's 29. If you've ever seen a movie with a textbook golden child, that's him, lazy, entitled, and somehow always the victim. While I was expected to be the independent one, Danny could do no wrong. He got new gadgets like clockwork, had his room remodeled every other year, and never had to lift a finger around the house. I, on the other hand, was mostly invisible unless I messed up. We stopped being a real family a long time ago. The final straw? When I was applying to college, my parents sat me down and told me they wouldn't be contributing a single dollar toward my education. Their reason? They could only afford to send one kid to school, and they had already decided that was going to be Danny. They told me, word for word, "You'll figure it out. You always do." And I did. I busted my ass working nights, maxed out student loans, and leaned on the kindness of a couple of friends' parents who offered small loans when I needed help. I paid back every cent. My parents? They never offered support, not even a phone call. Meanwhile, Danny spent 4 years at a pricey private university without ever touching a part-time job. Fast forward to now. I work in finance, specifically commercial banking. Not to brag, but I've done pretty well for myself. I was recently promoted and got a substantial raise. It was a huge milestone, and I went out for drinks with friends to celebrate. I hadn't planned on telling my family, I mean, we don't really talk, but I guess word got around. At the wedding reception, I was seated with some of my extended relatives, catching up over drinks and appetizers. Out of nowhere, my parents slid into the conversation like they belonged there. It felt off. Normally, they keep their distance at these things, so the fact that they suddenly wanted to talk? Suspicious. It started casually. My dad asked how work was going. I gave him a polite, non-specific answer. Good. Can't complain. I thought that'd be the end of it. Spoiler, it wasn't. My mom chimed in next. Anything exciting happened recently? Her tone was sugary, fake, like she was setting me up. I shrugged. Nothing worth announcing. Then my dad leaned in, smiling like he knew something I didn't. Oh, come on. We heard about the promotion, the raise. You really weren't going to tell us? It hit me then they hadn't just heard. They were fishing, and not for congratulations, for leverage. I stayed cool. It's not really anyone's business. He gave a little laugh and said, well, it's our business. After everything we've done for you, the least you could do is share your success. And there it was, the real reason they were there. I tried to stand up and walk away, but my dad raised his voice just enough to make it weird if I left. Sit down, Nathan. We're trying to talk to you as a family. Family? That word made my stomach turn. I sat back down, mostly out of spite. We're nearing retirement, he continued. All those years raising you, supporting you, and now we're just asking for a little help in return. I couldn't believe it. Support? You mean the bare minimum of feeding me and letting me live under your roof until I was 18? My mom's eyes widened. How can you be so ungrateful? At that point, everyone at the table had gone silent. My uncles, cousins, even a couple of in-laws. No one dared make eye contact. I knew what was happening. They were trying to guilt-trip me publicly into giving them money, not for bills or health expenses. No, it was for Danny. You see, Danny still lives with them, doesn't work. He spends most of his time gaming, hanging out with his online buddies, and showing off the latest tech he bought with our parents' money. They're running dry, and now that I'm doing well, they wanted me to pick up the slack. I snapped. You two made it clear a long time ago that Danny was your priority. You had the money to send him to college, to buy him a car, to let him mooch off you into his 30s. But when I asked for help to build my future, you laughed in my face. Literally. So don't talk to me about family now that you're desperate. My voice cracked a bit at the end. I hadn't meant to get emotional, but it hit me all at once the years I spent alone, struggling, feeling like a burden in my own home. I walked out before they could respond. Later that night, I found out through a mutual cousin that what I'd said had caused more fallout than I expected. Turns out, my parents had told other relatives that they'd paid for both my and Danny's education, and had even borrowed money from some of them under that pretense. They were using my name to collect favors and never paid anything back. And now, that lie was unraveling fast. 3 different relatives filed lawsuits against my parents that same week. Apparently, they'd been patient for years, thinking my parents were struggling, but now that they knew the truth, they wanted their money back, in full. I wasn't exactly thrilled that a family drama had blown up at a wedding, but I wasn't going to cover for them either. When Danny reached out to me the next day, asking me to help cover for them, basically to lie and say I'd made everything up to save face, I laughed. I said no. They made their choices. Now, they can live with them. After that wedding incident, I figured the whole thing would blow over eventually. Maybe there'd be some whispers, some judgmental glances at the next family gathering, but I didn't expect the absolute wildfire it turned into. 3 days after the wedding, I got a message from Danny. No, hey, no, how are you? Just straight to the point. You need to fix this. I stared at the screen for a while before laughing out loud. Fix what? Exactly. The truth? He followed up with a voice message. I don't usually listen to those. Danny's voice tends to send my blood pressure up, but something told me this one would be worth it. He was frantic. Bro, you don't understand. Mom and Dad are in deep. Uncle Ray and Aunt Lisa are suing them, and so is Aunt Marissa. They're saying Mom and Dad lied about needing money for your tuition. Dude, they're actually filing lawsuits. You need to tell them it was just a misunderstanding or something. Say you were emotional. Say whatever. I didn't even reply. I blocked his number. You see, this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was decades of lies finally catching up to the people who told them. And Danny? He wasn't worried about them. He was scared the gravy train was about to derail, and he might actually have to stand on his own 2 feet for once in his life. Later that night, I posted my side of the story online, just in case my family started spinning some fantasy version where I was the villain. It was a simple post, A summary of what happened at the wedding, what had been said, and how my parents had treated me growing up. No name calling, no dramatics, just facts. And I'll be honest, I didn't expect the kind of response it got. Hundreds of people reached out, some with similar stories, some just saying they were glad I stood up for myself. A few people even thanked me for giving them the courage to stop enabling toxic family dynamics. That hit me harder than I expected. But of course, not everyone was supportive. About a week later, my parents decided it was a good idea to show up at my place. I live in a condo with a secure front entry, but they must have followed someone in. I heard the buzzer ring twice, then heavy knocking. I peeked through the peephole and saw all three of them, Mom, Dad, and Danny, on my doorstep like a messed up sitcom reunion. I should have left them standing there, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the door just enough to make it clear they weren't coming in. "What do you want?" My dad didn't waste time. "We need to talk, son." The use of the word son almost made me laugh. These were the same people who hadn't asked about my life in over a decade, unless it had something to do with Danny or money. They wanted me to clear the air, by which they meant lie. Tell our relatives that I had misunderstood things, that I was bitter, that I'd made it all up. Apparently the lawsuits were getting serious now. My relatives had kept records, emails, bank transfers, even printed notes my mom had sent asking for money for Nathan's tuition. They were toast. And here's the kicker. Instead of trying to right their wrongs or even apologize, they wanted me to throw myself under the bus to protect their image. Danny chimed in, arms crossed, acting like he had any authority in this conversation. "You made this mess, man. You're gonna fix it." I tilted my head. "You serious right now?" Mom jumped in, of course. "Nate, we're your parents. We raised you, fed you. We did everything we could. You did the minimum." I cut in. "You let me sleep in the house and eat dinner. That's not everything. That's what any half-decent parent is legally required to do." Dad took a step forward like he was going to make some big dramatic plea, but I held my ground. "You're not the victims here. You took money under false pretenses, never paid it back, and now that the truth is out, you want me to lie for you? Sorry, but no." That's when Danny lost it. He stepped in close, real close. Tried the whole tough guy thing, squared his shoulders, stared me down like I was supposed to flinch. "You think you're better than us just because you got a fancy job?" I didn't even blink. "No, Danny. I think I'm better than you because I'm not 29 unemployed and living off my parents like it's still 2009. His face turned red. Mom tried to pull him back. I told them all to leave before I called building security. They left, but not before Danny threw one last gem over his shoulder. "This isn't over." "Okay, buddy." After they left, I sat down and honestly felt light, like I'd finally said everything I needed to say out loud to their faces. For years, I carried the guilt, the resentment, the wondering if maybe I was being too harsh. But standing there, seeing them scramble, seeing how far they were willing to go to protect their lies, yeah, I was done carrying that weight. In the following weeks, I heard through the grapevine that my parents were going around telling anyone who'd listen that I had come crawling back and offered to pay their legal fees out of guilt. That part made me laugh so hard I nearly spilled coffee on my laptop. They said they turned me down out of principle. Right. The same people who borrowed thousands under false stories now suddenly had principles. Relatives started calling me, asking if it was true. I told them the real version, every time, calmly, no drama, just facts. That's when the tide started turning. Turns out my parents had borrowed from people outside the family, 2 old friends, distant cousins, former neighbors, and now those people were finding out, and some of them were also considering legal action. My parents were in full panic mode, but me, I was doing just fine. I kept going to work, living my life, sleeping better than I had in years. And then I got the best update yet. Danny had to get a job. No, seriously. Apparently, with the lawsuits piling up and legal fees draining whatever savings they had, my parents could no longer afford to bankroll his gamer lifestyle. Danny had to get off the couch and start earning money. Word got around that he'd taken a part-time cashier job at a video game store. Poetic, right? So yeah, I might have taken a little detour on my lunch break that day. Walked into the store, casually browsed the shelves, and waited until he noticed me. He froze. I smiled. "Hey man, congrats on the job. Did mom cry on your first day, like she did when you started preschool?" He muttered something under his breath and flipped me off as I walked out. Petty? Maybe. But after everything, totally worth it. I wish I could say that was the end of it, that my one walk through the video game store was the final scene in a long, drawn-out saga. But of course, it wasn't. People like my parents, they don't go down quietly. They spin, they scramble, they look for the nearest lifeline, even if it means dragging someone else down with them. And right now, I was the only rope they could see. Word got around that they'd officially lost all 3 lawsuits. Every last one. The judges weren't buying their sob stories, and the evidence was too solid. Between bank statements, email trails, and direct messages, it was clear they'd borrowed money under my name and used it to fund Danny's freeloading lifestyle. They were ordered to pay back every penny within a few months or face further legal consequences. You'd think they'd finally reflect, maybe sit with their choices for a bit, but nope. Instead, they doubled down. I started getting random texts from unknown numbers. Some were vague guilt trips like, "Family is forever," or "You only get one set of parents." Others were a little more aggressive. One read, "You'll regret embarrassing your mother like that." Another, "You think your job makes you untouchable?" All anonymous, all desperate. I knew exactly where they were coming from. Then came the real kicker. Danny tried to blackmail me. He sent me an email because apparently texting after I blocked him wasn't working, claiming he was considering going public with a fabricated story about me and my job, something about misconduct or abuse of position. It was laughably vague, but I knew what he was trying to do, scare me into helping them out. Instead, I saved the email, forwarded it to my company's legal team just to be safe, and then called an attorney of my own. I'm not usually one to lawyer up fast, but I'd learned enough by now to protect myself before the flames got close. My lawyer said I had more than enough for a cease and desist and, if necessary, a defamation case. That shut him up. But what really broke them? The silence. They were so used to controlling the narrative, so used to people playing along, that when I stopped responding, stopped defending myself, stopped engaging, they fell apart. They started telling mutual relatives that I'd gone rogue, that I was lost, angry, ungrateful. But no one was really buying it anymore. People saw the truth now. I was the kid who got tossed aside, figured life out alone, and didn't owe anyone a damn thing. And then, like the universe was trying to add a little cherry on top, I got a call from an old friend who still lived in my hometown. Apparently, my parents had gone around to some of the community centers, and even their old church, trying to rally sympathy. They were crying about how you ruined their retirement, my friend told me, laughing. I shrugged. They ruined it themselves. I just pulled the curtain back. But here's where it gets a little poetic. One of the older relatives, my dad's uncle, I think, called me. We'd never been close, but he was one of the people they'd borrowed from. He thanked me, said he'd always wondered why my parents had been living comfortably while dodging repayment. He'd written the money off years ago, never expected it back. But now that he had it, he said it restored something. Not just the funds, but his belief that people do get held accountable eventually. He ended the call with, "You did the right thing, Nathan. Never let people tell you otherwise." That stuck with me. Meanwhile, Danny's situation was getting worse. My parents had to cut off most of his spending. The legal bills were piling up. He was stuck working hours he wasn't used to, dealing with customers he couldn't block or mute, and suddenly realizing that life outside the bubble isn't so forgiving. I know how that sounds cold, maybe even smug, but it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about balance. The same balance I never had growing up. When I was 19 eating cold pizza in my car between night shifts and lectures, no one was there to help. When I begged them for tuition money, they laughed. Now, they were asking me to lie, to save them from a mess they created? No, this wasn't revenge. This was karma showing up late, but right on time. One night, I sat on my balcony with a drink in hand, just breathing in the quiet. No drama, no manipulation, no guilt pressing on my chest. And I realized this was the peace I'd worked for. Not just the financial stability, not just the job or the apartment, but the ability to walk away from chaos and know I didn't owe anyone anything. And if you're wondering if I'll ever speak to them again, I don't know. Maybe someday, but it'll be on my terms, not theirs. Until then, I've got a life to live, and they've got a mirror to face. So, to anyone out there dealing with the weight of family guilt, favoritism, or being the responsible one while someone else coasts, just know it's not your job to carry it forever. Sometimes, walking away is the bravest thing you can do, and sometimes, silence speaks louder than anything else.